In 2014, the so-called Little Green Men seized Crimea without firing a single shot. It was hailed as a masterstroke. But 10 years later, that triumph has turned into Russia's most expensive blood debt. Satellite images now reveal the charred remains of S-400 batteries, while the once mighty Black Sea Fleet flees toward Novorossiysk. What was promised as a resort paradise has become a rusty steel trap. Why did the world's most advanced air defense become a slaughterhouse? The answer lies in a brutal new strategy: isolation. Ukraine has abandoned the blunt force of the past. They have moved on to a strategy of surgical excision, treating the entire Russian military presence in Crimea like a body on an operating table. Think of it as a biological X-ray. Kyiv is scanning the peninsula, identifying every nerve ending, every supply line, and every major artery that keeps the occupation alive. They are not just fighting a war, they are performing a high-stakes dissection of a military organism. The scalpels in this operation are precise and unforgiving. British-made Storm Shadow missiles are ghosting past air defenses to strike deep into fortified bunkers with terrifying accuracy. On the water, the Magura V-5 maritime drones have turned the Black Sea into a graveyard for the Kremlin's prestige. But the most devastating blow came with Operation Crabtrap. This was not a random strike. Ukraine waited for the perfect moment to drop a missile directly through the roof of the Black Sea Fleet headquarters. In a single heartbeat, 30 officers were killed, including high-ranking commanders. It was a decapitation strike that left the fleet leaderless, confused, and paralyzed. This is the new reality of the conflict. Ukraine is methodically cutting the veins of the Crimean logistics network, turning the peninsula from a strategic fortress into a massive, isolated cage. They are starving the beast, making it impossible to move fuel, ammunition, or reinforcements. Every strike is a calculated move to ensure that the Russian military can no longer breathe. And as the peripheral veins are severed and the pressure reaches a breaking point, all eyes turn to the $4 billion concrete aorta. The future of this conflict is not written in the stars, but in the cold, hard balance sheets of global power. Look at the €90 billion loan recently approved for Ukraine. This is not just a symbolic gesture. It is the vital oxygen for a military machine that is rapidly evolving. While Russia is forced to pull aging tanks out of deep storage, Ukraine is transforming into a global powerhouse for drone production. We are no longer talking about small workshops, but an industrial capacity to manufacture hundreds of thousands of drones every single year. This shift in production means that for every Russian armored vehicle that attempts to move, there are dozens of cheap, lethal drones waiting in the shadows. When a factory in Kyiv or Lviv receives a fresh injection of capital, it translates directly into a higher density of precision strikes on the front line. The math for the Kremlin is becoming unsustainable. Russia is burning through its legacy equipment and manpower at an attrition rate that defies modern military logic. They are trading their future for meters of scorched earth, and their stockpile of Soviet-era armor is not infinite. Meanwhile, the political chessboard in Europe remains a critical variable. We see internal friction within the European Union, with nations like Hungary often acting as a brake on rapid decision-making. However, the underlying reality is that the financial currents have already shifted. The money is flowing into the factories, and the gears of the Western defense industry are finally turning at scale. This is a contest of endurance between a modern, agile technological force and a rigid military structure that is slowly being bled dry. Ukraine is not just fighting for territory. They are methodically raising the cost of the Russian occupation until it becomes a terminal expense. They are betting that the logistics of maintaining a fortress on the Black Sea will eventually outstrip the Kremlin's ability to pay in both blood and treasure. If Crimea cannot sustain itself militarily, it will become the burden that collapses the entire empire. General Ben Hodges, the former commander of United States Army Europe, has long argued that Crimea is the decisive terrain of this entire conflict. In his strategic calculus, the peninsula is not just a piece of land to be traded, it is the ultimate center of gravity. His vision for a Ukrainian victory does not require a massive, direct amphibious assault or a bloody frontal charge across the Isthmus of Perekop. Instead, it is a sophisticated campaign of isolation. The objective is to systematically transform Crimea into an unsustainable island, a logistical wasteland where the Russian forces are slowly starved of the ammunition, fuel, and food required to maintain their grip. The primary target in this strategy is the Kerch Bridge. Hodges has consistently emphasized that this multi-billion-dollar structure is the umbilical cord of the entire occupation. If that cord is severed, the Russian military machine in the south begins to suffocate. But there is a profound, almost poetic irony at play here. Russia originally annexed Crimea under the pretext of protecting the Black Sea Fleet and ensuring its dominance in the region. Today, that very fleet is trapped in a state of humiliating helplessness. The once formidable warships, the primary reason for the Kremlin's obsession with this territory, no longer dare to linger in their historic home ports of Sevastopol. They have been driven out by a relentless campaign of asymmetrical warfare, forced to retreat to safer harbors far to the east to escape the reach of Ukrainian drones and missiles. By targeting air defenses and supply hubs, Ukraine is making the Russian presence in Crimea a terminal expense. Ukraine needs a sharper blade to realize this curse, and they have begun to cut. Crimea is no longer a fortress. It is becoming a tomb. Military strategists call it military necrosis. It is a slow, agonizing death where the limbs of an army begin to rot because the blood flow of supplies has been cut off. For months, Ukraine has been systematically cauterizing the veins of the Russian occupation. They are not just winning battles, they are dismantling the very possibility of Russian survival on the peninsula. Look at the Slavyanin ferry. This was not just a boat, it was a vital artery. A massive rail ferry capable of moving entire trains of fuel and ammunition across the Kerch Strait. When Ukrainian strikes reached out and touched its hull, they did more than sink steel. They severed the most efficient logistics route remaining. Without the ferries, the Russian war machine is forced to starve. And the cost of this failure is staggering. Take the Yamal, a large landing ship valued at $80 million. It is now a total loss. The Nikolai Filchenkov, worth $70 million, met a similar fate. These were the workhorses of the Black Sea Fleet, designed to haul heavy armor and thousands of troops to the front lines. Now, they are underwater monuments to Russian overreach. $150 million in high-tier hardware erased by asymmetrical strikes. With the sea routes burning, Moscow is forced to lean on the land corridor through Mariupol. But this is a desperate, fragile gamble. This thin strip of occupied territory is a narrow bottleneck, a geographical choke point. It is constantly watched by drones and sits well within the range of long-distance precision strikes. Every truck, every train, and every fuel tanker moving through Mariupol is a target moving through a kill zone. There is no safety in this corridor. There is only the terrifying reality of a path that could be cut at any moment. Inside the trenches and coastal batteries of Crimea, the atmosphere has shifted from bravado to a cold, creeping dread. The Russian soldiers stationed there are beginning to realize a terrifying truth. They are sitting ducks. They look at the horizon and see no rescue coming. They look at the bridges and see bullseyes. They know that when the supplies dry up and the missiles start falling, there is nowhere left to run. The land behind them is a fire zone, and the sea in front of them is a graveyard. This is the psychological breaking point of an occupied force that knows its escape routes are being systematically deleted. The noose is tightening. Every strike on a ferry and every sunken ship is a step toward the inevitable. When the Kerch Bridge falls, and it will fall, Crimea will officially become a giant prison. History has shown us time and again that a fortress is only as strong as the spirit of those within it and the truth of why they are there. The tragedy of Crimea teaches us a sobering lesson. Geography can be a shield, but it can also become a prison when it is held by force instead of consent. Beyond the billion-dollar ships and the strategic maps, there is a profound human cost that no balance sheet can truly capture. True security is not found in concrete spans or missile batteries, but in the bridges we build between people and the respect for a nation's sovereignty. As we watch the shadows lengthen over the peninsula, let us remember that the most enduring victories are not won on a battlefield, but in the quiet restoration of justice and the resilience of the human soul. The annexation of Crimea was once hailed as the ultimate masterstroke of power, yet today, that triumph has transformed into a slow, tightening noose around the future of the Russian Federation. Every precision strike on a ferry and every smoldering wreck of a billion-dollar warship serves as a grim milestone toward an inevitable conclusion. When the Kerch Bridge finally collapses, and military analysts agree it is a matter of when, not if, the peninsula will transform from a strategic jewel into a massive, isolated prison. There is a profound, bitter irony in this historical cycle. The very territory seized to project strength has become the primary catalyst for national exhaustion. People now live in the long, cold shadows of missile batteries, clinging to the illusion of a fortress that is slowly being hollowed out from within. Geography can be a shield, but it becomes a suffocating cage when held by force instead of consent. Ultimately, the greatest tragedy of Crimea is the realization that the thing you fought to steal is exactly what leads to your undoing.